After last year's provincial election, Premier Susan Holt instructed several of her newly minted cabinet ministers to restrict aerial herbicide spraying, as recommended about 3 years earlier by an all-party legislative committee. But senior officials from the Department of Natural Resources told lawmakers on Tuesday that they hadn't yet introduced a number of those recommendations. Those unfulfilled recommendations include buffers or setbacks meant to separate herbicide spraying from homes, bodies of water, and natural protected areas. The delays raise questions about the degree of influence the industry is exerting over the provincial government. Chris Norfolk, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister of Natural Resources, told MLAs that the setbacks could hurt New Brunswick's softwood lumber industry.
So, a few updates relative to these recommendations. I would say first that we have reviewed the implications of fully implementing these required setbacks, and I can say, based on our preliminary estimates, we do have some concern that this would create a significant impact to the province's timber supply.
The senior bureaucrat said that there was some movement on the recommendations, notably that Natural Resources increased what he called setbacks related to habitations from 155 meters to 500 meters earlier this year. But MLAs from the all-party committee apparently believed that this 500-meter restriction was already in place back in 2021 when they penned the report. At the time, their report recommended that those buffers be increased from 500 meters to 1 kilometer from dwellings. MLA Megan Minton asked about this discrepancy. Here's the response from the Natural Resources officials.
There was actually a recent change in the setback distance. So as Chris mentioned, originally it was 155 meters from dwellings, and it has been recently switched to 500, I believe. What also happens, though, is that anyone within 1 kilometer of that particular block does get a notification that spray program is happening in that area.
I did not receive a good explanation for why they have not implemented these, but it's very unacceptable. We're almost 4 years out from this being published.
The committee hearing took place just as the volunteer-led group Stop Spraying New Brunswick announced the results of its latest annual report card evaluating the performance of New Brunswick's major political parties. That group gave failing marks to both the governing Liberal Party and the official opposition Conservatives, and it gave the Greens a B-.
So for the Liberal Party, we gave them an F, and the F is because they basically failed to follow through with their election promises in the amount of time that would have been reasonable.
The NB Media Co-op requested interviews with the Minister of Environment and the Minister of Natural Resources, as well as the Conservative environment critic Sherry Wilson. By the time of this recording on Thursday afternoon, we had received a statement from Environment Minister Gilles Lepage. It said in part that pesticide use in New Brunswick is tightly regulated with a strong layered system that he said is guided by science. He said that since the November 2021 report, the government has added further oversight and restrictions, including reactivating the Pesticide Advisory Board and what he called stricter conditions with additional setbacks from dwellings, water, and additional notifications to the public. However, it remains unclear what he meant by additional setbacks for water. DNR officials seemed to indicate on Tuesday that no additional setbacks have been introduced for bodies of water. And we'll link the full statement from Environment Minister Gilles Lepage on our online publication at nbmediacoop.org.
We're here to issue our annual report card to the elected parties of the New Brunswick Legislative Assembly, and I'm just going to read out our marks. So for the Liberal Party, we gave them an F, and the F is because they basically failed to follow through with their election promises in the amount of time that would have been reasonable. The Progressive Conservative Party, an F, because they've never showed any interest in progressing on this Stop Spraying New Brunswick issue. And the Green Party, even though they speak about it in the Legislative Assembly and ask questions at committees, they just are not doing what we really need to have done, and that is to table a motion and to actually proceed with it, to have a debate in the Legislative Assembly about it. So the New Brunswick Greens have been in the media about this issue, so they've done some work, so that's why the mark for them is a B-. I'll just repeat what the promises were in the election of last year. They promised that they would implement the recommendations of the Climate Change Committee that were published almost 4 years ago. There were 20 recommendations in that report. And also they said that they would do research or look into alternatives to herbicide spraying in forestry. So both of these promises were then put in mandate letters to at least 6 ministers. So that means that it's definitely an urgent task. And now, we are basically coming into the fall, and we still see not much action, or at least not sufficient action on both of those points. On June 11th of this year, the Standing Committee had the Department of Environment in their meeting, where they were given an update on what progress had been made. And I'll just zoom in on a few of the things, but the buffers that were recommended by the committee were not implemented. So they gave like a much lower, like half or a little bit more of what the buffers were asked for. So the committee asked for a kilometer buffer from homes, and it was only increased to 500 meters. And for water courses, it was increased to 30 meters from 15 meters for ground spraying, and to 65 meters for aerial spraying. And the committee asked for 100 meters. And I just found out today that the PNAs, the protected natural areas, have still not been completed. They still have not completed whatever it is they will decide is the buffer, but the recommended buffer was 100 meters. So, and then on other points, they've just not given any clarity. Like they've said that they've completed some of the points, but with no sufficient explanation as to what exactly they've done. So that's a problem. And then the other one is that the government is supposed to be looking at alternatives, and we have not been given any indication as to what kind of work they're doing to look at alternatives. Like we just heard today from DNR that it's going to be challenging to get rid of the herbicides in forestry, for financial reasons, of course, and practical reasons, whatever that means. I mean, we know that Quebec was able to do it in 2001. So, we're just being given lame excuses, and again, more and more postponement. And in the spring of this year, we made it very clear that we were hoping that the government would stop issuing spray licenses this year while they're looking at alternatives, and they didn't do that either. Anyway, I'll let Dawn continue on. And
yeah, I mean, what we've seen is every consecutive government does the same thing. So they push the file along, no action is taken, and the same damaging forestry practices continue and continue. So what do we see? Well, we see more plantations, we see intensified forestry at a time in which it's clear that it's becoming drier and drier in the forest. So what we're doing is accelerating, essentially, that we're going to have more and more of these fires and emergencies down the road because every successive government fails to deal with this. We're dealing with a practice of forestry of making pulp and paper. Sorry, that's the most outdated model that I can think of. There's no value added to what we're doing with the forest. We're losing money off of every tree that we cut down. And at the end of the day, New Brunswick continues the same practices. This current government doing the same thing. Business friendly, so they're worried about the cost. The cost to who? Have they incorporated the fact that the damage that plantations are going to cause and more forest fires into this whole scenario? The only entities that are affected by increased costs of thinning operations instead of spraying are the forest monopolies that operate in New Brunswick. Has nothing to do with the province, has nothing to do with the interest of the people in the province. So in the end of the day, we're going to continue to see that the people of New Brunswick are being sprayed poisons on for the benefit of a few monopoly entities in the forestry business. There's no employment. The employment numbers continue to drop in forestry, and what we see is thinning operations would actually increase employment in the province. So the economic case for this, where the province talks, we don't know what the cost would be or whatever, is clearly not about the province. It's not about the people of New Brunswick. It's about the companies that prop them up. So we're just going to continue to see the same thing, and we're very disappointed in the current government. They made a lot of positive noises and then decided that they were going to backpedal on them. So really, how is that different than the previous government? I can say for the Conservatives, at least they don't pretend that they care. So, you know, that's kind of maybe a little bit more honest when the robber barons are allowed to run rampant and they fully support them, and then, you know, the fluffier kind PR-oriented government comes in and yet does the same stuff over and over again. So yeah, we continue to see the same thing. The frustration is building, of course, from the public, and it's only a matter of time before social cohesion breaks in the province, and this comes to a way to vent. People always ask us, why do we not do non-democratic or other means other than lobbying the legislature? We understand their frustration, but what are the real options otherwise? So this is in the province's hands. Province has full jurisdiction, has nothing to do with the federal government, so it's all within the province according to the Acts of Confederation. Therefore, they could simply not issue spray licenses. So that's it. But yet they're not going to do that, are they?
Kim has a few things to say as well. Yeah.
As some of you know, Dr. Matthew Betts concluded in his research that intense forest management in New Brunswick is driving habitat loss for the 54 most common forest bird species in our forests. The new forest strategy included 8.5% buffer strips as conservation land in the stated 30% conservation. This is completely unacceptable. Narrow mandatory buffer strips are not conservation area. All these buffer strips attempt is to not cause too much siltation of the waterways adjacent to them. We need to see meaningful improvements that are needed for wildlife and bird habitat. It's very troubling that the New Brunswick government is accelerating intensive forest management practices in the years to come. We ask this government and all political parties in the province to consider the precautionary principle in light of increased concerns around long-term effects of glyphosate, and to ban the harmful practice of herbicide spraying on our publicly owned Crown Forest, which is half of the forest space in New Brunswick. Habitat loss is associated with substantial population declines of forest species.
I just wanted to quickly point whoever is watching this to two maps that we have online. You can find them on our website or on our Facebook page. Basically, it's the map of the current spray licenses that the government has issued, and it's all synced with government data. And the other map is the historical spray map that shows all spray activity that has occurred on Crown land only from 1969 up until 2024, because we don't know yet what happened this year. And that data is also all government data, so it's all fact-based.